And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Hi there, I'm National Weather Service Meteorologist Peter Chan with your Alaska Marine Weather Outlook on this Saturday, January 18th, 2025. And checking the ice across the Arctic, we've had some brisk offshore winds at times. Polinias have opened up in areas of Kotzebue Sound and north of Shishmaref, as well as trailing down along Norton Sound. If we take a look at areas along the Yukon Delta coastline, also we find some polinias. The other thing of note, a couple of weather systems that have moved northward have brought in warmer air across the southwest. Interior temperatures above freezing, even pushing 40 degrees as a result. Not a whole lot of ice there in Bristol Bay, and there has been some loss a little bit there in Kuskokwim, but certainly given it is passing now mid-January, definitely been fairly mild down here across the southwest end of the state, and that trend's going to continue. Above normal temperatures centered over the southwest mainland here as we go up pretty much almost through the end of the month. In the meantime, late tonight, we have one frontal boundary washing out, new one taking shape here in the Gulf, and associated with one impulse of low pressure lifting, another one lifting north across the tip of the Aleutians into the southeast Bering, and then this secondary low taking shape, so that on Sunday, we're going to have this other front working its way up to the north and east. The pressure gradient, easterly winds will really increase here along the northern Gulf Coast around Prince William Sound and into Turnagain Arm in the upper hillside of Anchorage this Saturday night, especially late Saturday night through Sunday morning. And we're looking at some gusts again that could occur. Not as bad as the windstorm last weekend in Anchorage, but still some wind gusts of 50 to 70, maybe as high as 75 miles an hour in those normally really windy spots like Bear Valley. They could be increasing here across the region. The main concern is just any weakened tree limbs or other structures from the most recent destructive storm last weekend. This front, though, will push moisture eastward, coastal rains, but the intercoastal mountains will be blasted with heavier snow. A couple feet of snow could fall at Thompson Pass late this Saturday night through late Sunday night. Turnagain Pass could also see a foot or more of snowfall. And by the time we get into Monday, things will quiet down. There's still some areas of patchy light snow in the interior. This is all that remains, this trough along the outer panhandle coast. Then another kind of conglomeration of low pressures coming out of the North Pacific that'll eventually work their way northeastward toward the Gulf here during the middle of the week. In the meantime, though, winds across the panhandle on Sunday. Southeasterly here, Dixon Entrance, 5-6 foot waves, Ketchikan, Metlakatla. North 10 to 15. Stevens Passage up to Lynn Canal for the outer coast. South of Sitka, winds will be southeast 25-30 knots, but once you get north of there, out of the icy Strait, Gustavus, 40 knot easterly winds, southeast to 50 knot storm force winds, because the strongest winds are going to be in this area from Cape Suckling on over toward Hinchinbrook Entrance. Storm force winds are expected there. On Monday, we're looking at south winds, inner middle channels, 20 knots, but 30 gust 40 knots here, Dixon Entrance with 8 foot waves. For the outer coast, generally southwest winds at 20 to as high as 25 knots off of Craig, with swells running 12 feet. So on Sunday, with that front lifting northward, we have strong winds, gale force winds, high end 45 knots there, Prince William Sound. That's going to all funnel on through Turnagain Arm. And here we have, outside of Hinchinbrook Entrance, east-southeast storm force winds to 50 knots and waves in excess of 20 feet. As we get down Cook Inlet, we're looking at northeast to north winds 25-30 knots. The entrance of Cook Inlet could see 11-12 foot waves on Sunday. Then Monday, we're looking at lighter winds across the region. Southwest winds 15 knots outside of Hinchinbrook Entrance. South winds 10 knots Prince William Sound. Variable 10 knot winds upper Cook Inlet. And then south winds 15 knots, middle Cook Inlet down toward the entrance there from Anchor Point to Kamishak Bay. And then out across Kodiak Island on Sunday, south-southwest winds 15 to 20 knots, generally south winds 20 knots on the North Pacific side, and southeasterly winds up to 25 knots within the wider expanse here at Bristol Bay. Waves generally 2 to 3 feet on the Bering side. And then on Monday, with that conglomeration of lows off to the southwest, winds will pick up a bit. Kodiak Island, not so much so, south 15 to 20 knots, but as we trail out down along the Alaska Peninsula, look for southeast to east winds increasing from 25 to 30 knots, especially off of Sand Point and Falls Pass, where waves could be running 8 to 10 feet. The Aleutians for Sunday, eastern Aleutians kind of a mixed variable bag, but be coming back toward the east 25 knots west of Nikolsky through Atka and Adak, and then more northeasterly to 30 knots, Adak west toward Kiska and Shemya. And then on Monday, as that conglomeration of lows is in this region, the backside of it, some stronger winds. East winds 20 knots on Alaska, Dutch Harbor, northeasterly 25 knots Nikolsky, but then once you get Atka to Adak, we're looking at north to northwest gales 35 to 40 knots on Monday, with seas in excess of 15 feet north of Adak and Atka. And then for the southwest coast Sunday, south winds 25 knots into Bristol Bay, south winds of 20 knots into Kuskokwim Bay. Winds turn around the northwest 15 to 20 knots, St. Matthew to St. Paul. And then for Norton Sound, lower Yukon, we find winds generally southeasterly 20 to 25 knots with the ice there in place. And then on Monday, easterly winds 25 knots there within the wider expanse of both Bristol and Kuskokwim Bays. And as we cross over toward St. Matthew, St. Paul, northwest to north winds, the Pribilovs as high as 30 knot northerly winds, and then little shifting back around west winds into Norton Sound here between Nome and Imanik, and then north to northeast winds along the lower Yukon coast, again with the ice there. Some stronger winds to be had once we pass up through the Bering Strait. The area coming out of Kotzebue Sound, off of Kivalina to Point Hope and Cape Lisburne. Look for southeasterly gales to 35 knots as we round up along the Beaufort Sea coast. Winds will generally be offshore, south-southeast, strongest 25 knots around Prudhoe Bay, 10 knots to Kaktovik. And then on Monday, those winds become more west-southwest, 20 to 25 knots along the Beaufort Sea coast into the upper Chukchi Sea coast. And then as we drop on down through the Bering Strait, look for south-southwest winds of 20 knots. And then by the time we get to the north side of St. Lawrence Island, we're looking at winds generally out of the south-southwest right around 15 knots on Monday.